in 2024, who needs to win a playoff game? Notice the verbiage there. Not make the college football playoff. Who needs to win a college football playoff game? Because in 2024, with the expanded field, as you expand the dance to more teams, I think you also, in a lot of ways, turn up the pressure when it comes to expectations. Whereas previously, making the 4-team dance is like, hey, good to be in the semifinals. That's awesome. It probably means we won our conference. Probably means that we, had a pretty exciting season in a lot of ways. But I don't think that's good enough anymore. And I'll tell you a few teams. Georgia would obviously be on this list. I think that they are one of those teams that you probably don't need to explain too much as to why they probably need to win a college football playoff game. The standard for them is much higher, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But Ohio State is who I really want to talk about right now. Because for them, if they don't win a college football playoff game this year, I think that you're left after the season probably sitting on the couch as the game just finished on the television, and you're like, man, but our roster was so good. Our staff was so solid. This was supposed to be the year. And honestly, the good folks in Columbus, they're expecting a lot more than just a college football playoff win. They're expecting like a college football national championship, a college football playoff national title, So if they beat Michigan and they get to the dance and they have a bye and they're still left sitting there with the confetti on the ground and it's not for them, it's going to feel very empty. And we've said this a lot about Ohio State, man. To whom much is given, much is required. The old Peter Parker and Uncle Ben conversation. With great power comes great responsibility. With great roster talent for Ryan Day comes great responsibility. If you don't get it done this season, win a national title, that is, you're left saying, okay, when's it going to happen? But if you don't win a college football playoff game, I think that things will get very uncomfortable very, very quickly in Columbus. Right now, they have the second best odds to win the whole freaking thing. So, yeah, Ohio State winning a playoff game, that is the bare minimum for them out there in Columbus. For Texas, I think they got to win a playoff game. Because last year, it felt a lot like, okay, Texas is here now. But if they were to win a college football playoff game, then you look at what happened last year and say, okay, yeah, that was real. Now, I've told you many times, Texas fans, I think last year was real. I have no doubts about that. However, when you look at what would be said if you don't achieve at a high level in 2024, first year in the SEC, people would look back and say, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. They lost 2 All-Americans on the defensive line. You lost 2 NFL draft picks at wide receiver. Of course, Texas took a step back. I don't think that's the conversation you want to have about your football team going into the new conference that is the best in college football, which is the SEC. Good teams, they can win at a high level for 1 year. Good programs, though, they have sustained success over an extended period of time. And that's what Texas is now striving to do. So it would legitimize last year, and also it would, as I already alluded to, kind of turn down all that volume around the SEC this, the SEC that, Texas can't this, Texas can't that, and that would be a good way to live if you're a Texas fan. All right, Oregon. They have too good of a roster, in my opinion, to not win a college football playoff game. And the big thing for me with Oregon is momentum is just so critical for them. It's critical. Like, whenever you're climbing a mountain, and Oregon is right now climbing the mountain that is the college football world, whenever you take a second to breathe, or whenever you take a second to like collect yourself, and I can say this from experience, I climbed Mount Rainier 4-ish years ago. I hate heights, first of all. But second of all, every time I stopped, that mountain looked a lot steeper. I lost momentum. It was a lot harder to regain that momentum of climbing up that mountain. That's Oregon right now. Right now, they're kind of that hot brand. Dan Lanning, I've told you many times, I think he is one of the best young coaches in college football. He is probably, right now, for my money, the most potential in college football coach or player. Like, I'm buying stock in Dan Lanning like it's going out of style. With that being said, if they were to have a lackluster first season in the Big Ten, start to reevaluate, okay, well, what is Oregon? What is Dan Lanning? What are the Ducks? I think that would be something that people are saying. So you got to keep momentum. You got to keep it rolling. And it's also worth noting, too, for Oregon, they do not live in a They are not near high school recruits that live in a talent-rich state. No shade on Oregon. Like, let's just be real here. The Players that Oregon is going to go after is in California, Texas, Florida, Georgia. So they have to make a case to be visible to these teams, and performing at a high level, winning a college football playoff game would be a great way to do that. Now, for Ole Miss, they have the 5th best odds to win the national championship. Winning a college football playoff game, to me, I've sort of talked myself into this situation where, okay, that probably needs to happen for them. I think making the college football playoff at this point feels like it should happen. And if it sounds like we're asking a lot of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, it's because we are, because they understand now this is a year where you got to make something happen. Like, if you can have success by relying super heavily on the portal, and I'm not just talking about taking like a couple players here, a couple players there. Florida State would be, I guess, the most portal-heavy team that we've seen win at the highest level, winning their conference title game. But for Ole Miss, if they win at the highest level, if they go out and win a college football playoff game with how heavily they lean on the portal, taking like 20 guys a cycle, then you, one, legitimize Lane Kiffin and his way of doing things. And two, I think, like we said many times here, if you're in the transfer portal, you look at Ole Miss now as a destination of a place that's only going to continue to crescendo. And what they did over the course of this last offseason through the portal, they got some very key ingredients. Very, very key ingredients. They beefed up the defensive line. They kept Jackson Dart from going to the NFL, not the portal. They're primed to do something big this year. In Ole Miss, they were at first, I think, after that New Year's Six bowl win, thinking playoff. Now I think they're thinking win a playoff game with the way they've attacked through the portal and the way that they are situated going into 2024. Alabama, they need to win a playoff game, if you ask me. I think we've talked a lot about the external, optics for Bama and validation externally and all that, but for Alabama, and if you can win a college football playoff game, it takes care of that side of things. But how about the internal validation? How about for this locker room? Because a lot of these guys now were recruited by Nick Saban. They came to Alabama to play for the GOAT. And everyone that stayed now is choosing to play for Kalen DeBoer. But if you have success at that kind of level and you win a college football playoff game, it's like, okay, Bama's still Bama. And I'm not saying that if they don't get that done, they're going to see this portal exodus or anything like that, but I am saying that if you're in that locker room, you have more buy-in based on results. That's just kind of the way this whole thing works. So for Alabama, I do think that it's important for them to win a college football playoff game, and I do think it would help recruiting, as we've mentioned already many a time before on this show. Now, when I put this question out on my Twitter page at JD Pickell, y'all responded as you always do in elite fashion. But it was very interesting to me that one team kept popping up and getting traction. And the more I thought about it, I think the more that I agreed with y'all. Y'all believe, and I'm now on board, that Notre Dame needs to win a college football playoff game. I think that's fair to say. And for Notre Dame fans, they've sort of had this feeling for a while, and since before Marcus Freeman got there, that they've always had the ingredients to compete at the highest level. They've made college football playoff games before. They hadn't won one just yet. They've made national titles before. They hadn't won one in a long time. And so now there's this feeling of okay, when is it going to happen? And if it's going to happen, it feels like year 3 under Marcus Freeman would be that year because of how he attacked through the portal as well, at the skill player positions, at the quarterback position, who they bring back on defense. Notre Dame, I think as a overall reputation in college football is people view them as that friend that's always telling you what they're about to do. That friend, you know that friend now. They're always about to take a trip. They're always about to start a business. They're always about to go back to school. They're always about to do something, but then a couple of months pass, turns into a year, turns into 2 years, and guess what? They haven't done it. That's not Marcus Freeman. They've clearly made strides since he's been there from a roster level, from a recruiting standpoint, and I think that this is going to be the year where they compete at the highest level and I believe have a very good chance to go out and obviously make the college football playoff. According to Vegas, they have minus odds to make the dance. And then in addition to that, I think they're going to have a chance to win a college football playoff game depending on who they draw. So who needs to win a playoff game in 2024? Georgia, yeah, we'll throw them in the mix there. I think they have higher expectations with that. But the real teams we want to talk about here, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Notre Dame. Expectations. Expand the field, that's great, but expectations, they ramp up with that. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.